Hey y'all, and welcome back to Dr. Mandie Unedited, the podcast where we're talking all about research writing and PhD realness. My name is Dr. Mandie. I'm a researcher and an academic editor, and my goal is to help people empower themselves to complete the PhD process and become amazing researchers. So, like I mentioned last week, I'm doing a little bit of a different format with the podcast. We're going to be discussing 3 different topics surrounding research, writing, and PhDs. So, today in research, we're going to be talking about how to develop your skills to be interdisciplinary because when you get into the real research world, you'll find that you might not necessarily be staying within the field you expected to study. In our Write It Right section, we're going to be talking about the differences between M dashes and N dashes. So I've been seeing a lot of interchangeable dashes in the work that I've been editing recently. So I thought we could clarify that and get some help on how to do them right. And then for our PhD tip of the week, I'm going to talk a little bit about the literature review and how you can prepare to do it so it doesn't get you stuck later in the dissertation or thesis writing process. I love when my brain just makes up words like that. But I will also be discussing last week the question that I had asked, and I'm going to give you a new question that you can answer. Now, of course, if you feel inclined to answer this question, you can do so in the comments, or you can go over to my TikTok at Life with Dr. Mandie. Doctor is Dr. Mandie is Madie, and you can answer on my weekly post about the podcast, or you can join the People PhD pod. That's People Pursuing Higher Degrees pod over on Discord. The link to that will be in the description below, and you can answer that question in the group as well. Get a lot of answers from your colleagues and experts and build a community over there. I'm really excited about that group. We've got several members now, and it's meant to be a really good safe space where you can come and ask all of your questions about research or vent about the struggles of the PhD life. So yeah, make sure that you check out a couple of those things because like I said, I'm dedicated to bringing resources to you, and I really want to help you make your life a little bit easier in the PhD and research and writing world. So let's get on with it. Let's start with the goss as per usual, and the goss this week is going to be all about Christmas. So yeah, if you did or did not know by now, I'm an American living in the UK, and so I get a lot of really unique experiences because of that. And one of the things that I love is how big the UK is on Christmas time. So the UK tends to do a lot of these little town Christmas lightings, and this past weekend I got to go and see the city center light up with all of the beautiful Christmas lights. It was so fun because they bring out a bunch of local singing groups, usually small children and little choirs like that. It's so fun to see. This year they had the Grinch wandering around town. I got to see Santa Claus. I live in a coastal city right next to the ocean, so I got to see some really beautiful ships come in as well. So yeah, I mean, that day was really exciting to see all of the Christmas lights light up. And it's really cool that they have these like all over town, like all week. There are several different little lightings and different little sections of Plymouth, I guess you could say, which is really cool. And I'm really looking forward to the Christmas markets. I love how much Christmas stuff is out, how excited people are to get into the Christmas spirit. And last year I didn't really get to do the Christmas market thing because, well, I mean, look, my partner, he was gone on a ski trip for about 3 weeks. He wanted to be, I guess, like an Olympic Fijian skier, you know what I mean? And so he was doing some training on that. So I haven't gotten to get like the full experience yet, I feel like, of UK Christmas. And so, yeah, I'm really eager to try out some of those things this year. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all that's going on in my life. I really am, I'm anticipating greatly being able to put my own Christmas decorations up because last year we spent a lot of money buying a lot of cool stuff to decorate the house. However, as I have hinted to in the past, we are in the process of purchasing a new home, and we literally thought that we would have it in our grass by like the summertime, like this past summer. However, the house buying process in the UK is quite illuminating to say the least. And the process has been very long. We're on like month 7, y'all. It is exhausting. And so I was hoping to have a house by Christmas. Hopefully, that will still be the deal. It remains to be seen. But before then, I have to wait to put up my Christmas lights, and it's very sad. And I can't even put up the Christmas tree, but I've got the nutcracker out. That's about the best we can do. Anyway, let's move on to our research realness segment of the day. So, this is a segment where I am just going to tell you a little bit about something that is important in research in general that I think maybe newer researchers or PhD students miss out on. And so, today I want to talk about developing your skills for interdisciplinary work. So, if you are somebody who may be in the PhD process, of course, you're focusing on one area that you're researching, and you're researching on your own for the most part. However, I find that, if you expect to go on into the research world, you're probably maybe not going to stay in the field of research you expected to stay in, or you're going to be doing a lot of interdisciplinary work with other people from other fields. And so I think it's really important to kind of start assessing how your unique skills are going to help in that interdisciplinary work. And the sooner that you figure these skills out, I think the better. Because for me, I researched in education for my PhD. Now I research in health professions, a lot of social care and some healthcare research. So at first, it really kind of took me back on how really just to research in general. Now that I wasn't in a field that I expected to be. However, one of the things that I learned was that, my unique experiences of being an educator and researching in the education field could help me stand out in in this new field, and it can also help kind of, yeah, I mean, just really bring those like creative solutions and those unique perspectives. So that's something that I wish that I had maybe started to anticipate and learn a little bit more when I was in the PhD process. So I want to maybe inspire you today to think about like what skills do you have that could translate across fields or be unique in a different field. So, for example, yeah, being an educator, going into social care and healthcare, of course, I have that background of creating curriculum. I have that research knowledge of understanding how people learn. And so, a lot of my research in social care and healthcare deals with communities and making better evidence informed practices and policies. And so, my knowledge and understanding, well, number one, how people learn has come in handy in helping me suggest ideas or develop training or, disseminating materials across different audiences. Maybe I need to disseminate it to a policymaker or an agency, or maybe just to people, and the language and things like that needs to change in order for those people, those different areas, to be able to learn what I'm trying to tell them needs to happen through my research. Yeah, like just understanding how people learn has been a really great skill for me to stand out within that kind of research world, because not everyone has that background. And then, like my creativity and developing curriculum in an exciting and an engaging way has been really helpful to implementing, yeah, like those training materials and learning materials that people often want as an output in research. And yeah, it's helped me stand out in the social care world, because yeah, at the end of the day, people are kind of looking like, okay, who knows how to build curriculum? Who knows how to train people? Guess what? Mandie is an educator, and Mandie does. So yeah, the TLDR on that is start thinking now about what your skills are, what your strengths are in research when you're in the PhD program. And yeah, don't hold back on exploring those things, because it might, like for me, when I got into the research world, it kind of was a hiccup for a second in how I could participate, because I just wasn't thinking broadly enough on how my skills could, make an impact on the research in the field that I'm working on. Okay, so food for thought there. Let's go move into our next section, which I'm calling the Write It Right section. The WRITE, and then it right RIGHT section, where we're going to talk about just some things that you can work on in your writing. Of course, I am an editor, and I see a lot of things that are maybe kind of consistent across manuscripts and dissertations and theses that I edit. But sometimes they surprise me. I don't realize, that people might struggle with these little things. And I often ask myself, why is it that these things are consistently an issue? So today I want to talk about the differences between M dashes, that's EM, like monkey, and that's the long dash, versus N dashes, that's EN as in Nosferatu. I don't know. Look, the ADHD, I just say random things sometimes. So if you giggled at that, yeah, I giggled at that too. But that's the short dash. So I might refer to these as long dashes and short dashes, just for a little bit of clarity, because I know it might be difficult to hear what I'm saying if I'm saying M or N dashes. And so yeah, I find that people who use these interchangeably. I see varying lengths of dashes in writing. And I also think that, where a short dash, an in dash, might be appropriate, people don't use them. So, an M dash, or the long dash, is basically a dash that can replace things like commas or semicolons or parentheses. And this is the dash that, yes, a lot of people worry about using, because it is the one that a lot of people get apparently accused for using AI with. So yeah, AI, when you see it come up with answers, you often see that it uses an M dash or a long dash in its answers. And so when people unfortunately do ask AI to write things for them, and they copy and paste it into their work, it often has M dashes or the long dash, and people kind of see that as an indicator for using AI. However, I do see people use the M dash occasionally, definitely. And look, I mean, if you're not using AI, you got nothing to worry about. But the thing about an em dash or a long dash is that this one is really just like optional, isn't it? So if you're confused about how to use it appropriately, or if you are not sure about, you're worried about the AI situation, then just don't use it. You don't really have to use an em dash really for anything. Sometimes I know there's a few templates out there where schools kind of would prefer the em dash to be used for, a definition. So if you have a word afterwards, they would prefer to have an em dash, where in some cases it might be more appropriate to use a colon or an en dash, or the short dash. So I mean, really, that might be the only reason that you actually really have to use the long dash. But at the end of the day, if you just absolutely need to use it, yeah, it just replaces a comma or a semicolon or a parentheses. So for example, if you said something like the results, though surprising, were consistent with trials. So of course you would put though surprising in a little comma situation in a sentence. But if you wanted to get real creative with it, you could replace those commas with em long dashes. Look at me trying to like keep it all straight. So yeah, you could say the results long dash, though surprising, long dash, were consistent with trials. One more thing to note about the long dash is that when you use this in writing, check your formatting rules, but in APA 7, you typically don't include any spaces before or after that dash. So the word will come, the dash will come immediately after, and then the next word comes immediately after that. So now let's talk about en dashes, or the short dash. This is the one that you're more likely to use in writing, and you're more likely to be required to use in writing. So let's talk about some scenarios in which you might use it. First of all, you might use it for page ranges. So if you say pages 20 through 70, you will use an en dash, a short dash between 20 and 70. And so unlike the longer dash, you will include, according to APA 7 at least, again, go and check your formatting style guidelines, but you will put a space before the last letter or number, the dash, and then the next letter or number. So another note on using the dash to replace words like through or to when you're referring to maybe a number range, I think typically in APA 7, they would prefer you to use a word if you're referring to that range in a narrative. So you could say to the actual word, through 7 in the narrative, but maybe in a table or something like that, you could just use a dash. It's not absolutely forbidden that you could use a dash in the narrative. So if you're saying people ages 50 through 70, you could use a dash in place of through, but yeah, I mean, they typically prefer the actual word to go in the middle there. Another reason that you'll be really likely using the short dash, the en dash, and I see this issue consistently, is for compound words. I see a lot of people not necessarily want to put the dash for compound words, and I often have to add those in. But for words like trauma informed, that's a big one. So you would have a dash in that case, and in that case, you don't add any spaces around the dash. Some other really common examples I see is, things like evidence based or evidence informed practice. So evidence and based or evidence informed would have a dash in between them. And then also things like, I see this a lot in quantitative work, but like I think it's called the Shapiro-Wilk test. So when you have two names like that referring to things like tests or surveys or questionnaires, you would put a dash and in dash in between those. So at the end of the day, if you are not sure how to use the long dash, the em dash, I would just leave that out. The in dash, the shorter dash, you're going to have to probably use within your writing, but the important thing is like use the same dash every time, okay? Don't use a longer dash for one page range and then down the line use a shorter dash, because I see people with all sorts of different lengths of dashes and I don't know where y'all are getting them, okay? Now let's move on to our PhD tip of the week. I want to talk about the literature review. This is not going to be a conversation about how to do the literature review, but how to do it strategically, because one of the issues that I see with the literature review, because it's kind of like the only part of your dissertation or your thesis that is pretty much completely up to you to do. You don't have as many guidelines as you do with other chapters. The literature review, yeah, it's a free for all. And so people often get stuck in trying to figure out how much or what information they're going to put in the literature review, or how to organize the information to put in the literature review, or how to create a story out of the information. So that typically is what kind of makes people come to like a dead stop in their PhD process. And it's the one thing that I always see people delay upon because they can't get to. Maybe, I mean, typically I think it's like a 30-page minimum for a literature review, and I see people really struggling to reach that minimum. So let's talk about how you could strategically start to do the literature review as soon as possible. Because yes, you should be doing the literature review as soon as possible in your PhD journey, regardless of how your program works. Some of us, I know, kind of start out with, a fully formed research idea, and some of us go through like coursework first and then have a stage that we develop our idea. So regardless if you have a fully formed idea or not towards the beginning of your PhD phase, most of us probably already know generally what we want to write about. So it's important to go ahead and start getting our literature review game on, as early as possible, so we don't end up facing that time lag because we can't figure out how to meet the minimum requirement. So regardless if you have like a solid topic in place or not, some things that I would start doing at the very beginning or as soon as possible in your PhD program is, number one, I said it last week, I say it all the time, get on Zotero, y'all. Zotero is a paper organizer. It is completely free. It has a ton of different plugins that you can literally just add papers to your Zotero account in one click off of the internet. It can also in one click input a citation or a reference into your writing, and it's just so useful to have all your papers in one place. You can highlight, you can write notes within the paper, you can see the DOI, the abstract of that paper in Zotero. Is so extremely useful. So first of all, get yourself comfortable with one of those paper organizers, whether it is Zotero, or if you don't like Zotero, you can use Mendeley as well. And then start just inputting papers that you find into that manager from the get-go. The second thing, and this is probably one of the most important pieces of information or advice that was offered to me in my PhD process, is that if you are somebody who is doing coursework before you get into like a whole PhD research topic deciding and planning process, use that coursework to start writing on the topic. And so every time you submit a paper, every week that you submit a paper, you should be gathering a little bit more information and a little bit more papers that you could maybe in the future use in your literature review. And then the good thing about that is that, well, you've read those papers already, you know what I mean? So instead of coming to this point where you have to go in and find a bunch of papers and read a bunch of stuff, you can already start reading a few papers at a time. You can also start developing your overall cognizance of the topic, the issues within the topic, the synthesis of what people are saying on the topic when you incorporate the topic that you're kind of thinking you want to go with into the theme of your coursework. So when you have a paper in your course, try to align it somehow with your topic. Now, in the future, I'm planning on doing maybe a whole video or a whole kind of writing blog on the entire process of conquering the literature review, because one, it's something that I constantly have to write to my editing clients. When I write notes, I do see a lot of issues with literature reviews. And two, yes, the literature review is something I get a lot of questions on from everyone else who is simply just working on the PhD process. So if you are interested in knowing when that information is going to come out, definitely go and join the the People PhD pod over on Discord, because I will be posting all of the resources that I make, as long as I've already posted a ton of other resources from the internet on there that might help you out as well. I also already have a how to complete your literature review in 90 days guide, which is a week by week guide on things that you should be doing in order to complete your literature review in a decent amount of time. That's available on the Discord, so make sure that you go and check that out as well. Okay, let's move on to our question of the week. So first, let's discuss last week's question a bit, and then we'll discuss the next week's question. So last week, I asked if people who are printing out papers for their research, why are you printing them out rather than using a organizer like I mentioned, Zotero? Because yeah, I do see a lot of people print out papers, and I was just interested to know why. And so the response was kind of interesting, because I expected people to, yeah, be kind of like, well, I don't really know how to use Zotero. I did get a few responses like that, but some of the interesting responses were around not like the eye fatigue and having to look at a computer all of the time. So I wanted to kind of like offer just a little tidbit of advice on some things that have helped me in looking at computers all of the time, because that's what I do all day, every day, is look at screens, and I get how that can be very, very exhausting. So in the beginning, when I started using the computer pretty much for like my whole work day, I definitely got a lot of headaches, and my vision, I think, has kind of decreased a little bit. I probably need to go get my eyes checked out. I did try the glasses for a while, but I didn't really see a lot of improvement in using glasses, and I think that it also might be a little bit more worse using glasses than beneficial. So I don't use glasses anymore, but a couple of things that I find is helpful are eye, this is gonna sound silly, eye exercises. I read this thing about maybe, every hour or couple of hours, what you're supposed to do is basically just stare off at like a wall, or maybe something in the distance through a window, maybe about 10 to 20 feet away, and you just kind of stare at that for 20 minutes. And that, or not 20 minutes, good God, I couldn't stare at anything for 20 minutes. My ADHD could never. 20 seconds is what I meant to say. Go ahead and look at something for about 20 seconds. And what that kind of does is help reset your vision, I guess. I find it really helpful. And of course, if you're not just a sit and stare, I guess you could just make sure you're getting up from your laptop, or doing something that doesn't involve looking at lights and screens. Of course, there's so much information out there on the different types of light that screens emit and how it can be a little helpful, not helpful, dangerous to your eyesight and your mind. But I think, like, overall, if you can't avoid it, just, make sure you're taking time away from that periodically throughout the day. The other thing I think is helpful, that is that I just discovered that there are different settings on your computers that make the screen different colors. And so I discovered this because somebody mentioned to me that they use different colored screens for dyslexia. So reading things in different kind of, I guess, light wavelengths helps with reading in that respect with dyslexia. But I find it's also helped me, yeah, just kind of easier on my mind and my brain and my eyeballs to change up the colors on my screen every once in a while. So check your computer, see if you have any kind of functions for that. I work off of a Mac, so it has all of those things, and I imagine other systems do too. But anyway, okay, my question this week is kind of surrounding that whole thing we talked about with the literature review, is what do you think slows you down the most in the PhD process? So yeah, like I just mentioned, literature reviews tend to slow people down. I think one thing that slows me down sometimes is just initiating the process of finding out the answers. So for example, if I have to email people that I don't really know to get answers, sometimes it can be really difficult to start that process. I also talk about, my PhD, my dissertation. The sample was from people that I didn't know, and they were online. So I had to like cold email a lot of people, and I knew that that was going to be something that would slow me down if I didn't go into it full force. And so I really had to commit to emailing a certain amount of people every day, and just swallowing my nerves and just clicking send on those emails. So what do you think slows you down the most in the PhD process? Of course, like I said, you can answer that in the comments. You can answer it on my TikTok, or you can answer it on the People PhD Pod on Discord, and I will discuss the answer next week. In the meantime, if you need any help on the editing process of your paper, I edit papers, dissertations, theses, journal articles, coursework, everything, you name it. Go ahead and reach out to me at mandiekf@gmail.com. So that's MANDIE kangaroo foxtrot @gmail.com. Or you can check out my website that has a lot of other media and resources on it as well, and that's www.drmandieedits.com. So that doctor is spelled out in that case, and edits has an S on the end. In the meantime, make sure you write something today. Make sure you take some time away from the computer today, and I will talk to you next week, okay? See ya, bye.